No, I mean, architecture is political. We gotta have that stuff.
Indeed.
We're tearing down communities to build multifamily, and you have to understand we are creating displacement. You're displacing Black and brown folks, and they don't come back.
Half of this podcast would be dedicated to the history of Tyler House, my journey and my discoveries, and hey, I'm going to solve this housing problem.
Hey guys, what's up? My name is Melissa Daniels. This is the Architecturalist Political Podcast where Black and brown folks talk about architecture. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and be part of my storytelling. In this episode, I had a pleasure of talking to Isa Segalovich. She's a TikToker, Instagrammer, artist, advocate, ally. She has so many titles behind her name. I've always been interested in how allies become allies, how they discover what Black and brown people have already known. In talking with her and talking with Chris, and ironically, they know each other. In some way, somehow, there's a Black woman involved. There's a Black woman that they took a class from, and they taught them something that it was never in path of their education. And then they pause and realize that something's not right. And they begin to research on their own, and they begin to read books and dig deeper. And it's like this aha moment for them. And it's like, wait, no, this isn't right. And I must do something about it. Isa took a lot of flack for what she believes in. What I mean by flack, I mean online. Like, she says a lot of things, a lot of what you may deem as controversial. As you know, social media is not kind to people, but she continues doing it anyway. That to me is what an ally is all about. An ally put themselves on the line because they see the injustice that's going on. And I don't use that word lightly. I don't hand out that word ally a lot. And this is my own personal definition or personal belief of what an ally should look like and who I call an ally. Because, you know, you can look her up and like, no, she's not my ally. And, you know, to each your own. And you have every right to believe that. There could be some stuff that comes up with Isa that I didn't even know. And that would warrant a conversation with her if that ever comes up. And the crazy thing about it is she would be open to that conversation. And she may agree with it. She may not agree with it. And at that point, it would be another conversation. I don't know what would happen, to be quite honest with you. But I know for sure I can always contact her. Like, listen, I heard this and that. Let's talk about it. And she could present some stuff. I could present some stuff. And we'll go on from there. But the point is that part of being an ally is you're able to have those tough conversations. You're able to go to that person and say, hey, I don't like this. I don't like what you said. And this is why I don't like what you said. So at that point, there may or may not be a decision. Like, if I feel strongly about something and it's completely opposite of what she believes in, then things will change. Or she'll understand and okay, I think I was wrong in this, and she'll go and change it. Or I realize that I'm wrong, and I would say, I see your point, I was wrong, and move on with life. But that's the key thing is that you're able to have a conversation. When you're on social media, because you're limiting characters, because you're limiting video, unless you do like a YouTube or something, your point may not be able to come across fully. And that's when you're able to pull that person aside and have that conversation. And in today's age, it's so easy to just jump the gun, and it's so easy to point out things. And I've been guilty of that. I've been 1,000% guilty of jumping the gun. And I'm like, oh, whoa, wait, I was wrong in this. I was wrong in posting this. I will immediately take it down and do my research and to say, like, you know what? You're right about this. I don't know much about this topic. Let me move on. As things get more progressive in how we obtain information and trying to decipher which is fake news and which is real, that the information that I research is a credible source is very important. And even the research that I'm doing, and again, this is not my 9 to 5. I have to piecemeal things together. I have to read something, I may have to put it down because something else is more pressing. And I also appreciate all of you listeners, especially those who slide into my DMs. Either just tell me that they really appreciate the information I provide, or even the ones that correct me and we have a conversation, we talk, and you guys educate me on these things. And I just want to say thank you for that. If I haven't already personally, thank you for your support and for just talking to me. I really enjoy talking to you. And some of you even end up being guests on this podcast because our conversations run so deep. And this is part of it too. Issa and I have been talking for a while about various things. And, I just asked her, hey, before you become even more famous, let me get you now on this podcast and talk. Thank you for your support and, being my tribe. When I won the Whitney M. Young Award and I posted on my LinkedIn about how grateful I am and how important a tribe is. Like, if it wasn't for my exposure in high school, I would not be in this field today. And the amount of support that I have it's incredible. Like, it's insatiable. And you don't know how many blessings I count in a day because of people who truly care, and for my listeners too, like those who care about what I say, those who just are standbys, then whatever. You know what I'm getting at. Meeting new people every single day. Just want to put that out there. I don't have a opportunity to say that, or I shouldn't say opportunity. I don't say that enough. I'm currently shopping for a new host. Right now I use Anchor, and Anchor's free for me. That's why I've been really slow to respond to it, but it's part of Spotify. So I've been looking for a new RSS hosting feed. And part of the things that I don't like about Anchor is that I can't do dynamic content. And what's dynamic content? Well, I'm about to tell you some upcoming things. I will be at AIA convention in Chicago along with the 3 other ladies for the Whitney M. Young Award. We have a session on Wednesday, June 23rd, I believe, at 2 p.m. If you're attending the AIA conference in Chicago, I invite you to come and listen to us and meet me. And I will also be there for a couple of days attending the rest of the convention. I am also doing Equity by Design in April. Check on my LinkedIn profile or Rosa Shang's profile, or you can Google it too. So going back to Anchor doesn't do dynamic content, and what that allows me to do is make announcements like this. So if you're listening to this in July, August, September 2024, and it's now 2022, and you're like, I missed this, part of dynamic content will allow me to put a date so that you won't be listening to this in the future of an event that already happened. If you have any suggestions of which is best for me to use, I am all ears. There's not that many out there to begin with, but I don't really see the difference between like Libsyn and Buzzsprout, and you're like, what are you talking about? Who are these things? What are these things? If you're a podcaster or you're in the industry, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so I'm in the search for that. Anything else, guys? No, I think that's it. I'm gonna let this episode speak for itself, and I hope you enjoy it. Here you go. Is it Interstellar Isabella?
Yeah, Interstellar Isabella.
Okay. How did you come up with that name?
Oh my gosh, I don't even remember. I think that was originally my Instagram name. I think it was probably early high school that I was just playing around with my name. My mom named us all like these really long names. They're Gabrielle, Francesca, and Isabella. And so it was just me playing around with my friends.
So Isa, is that?
Yeah.
You pronounce your last name?
Segalovich.
Segalovich.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That doesn't sound like a Williams or Daniel or.
No, it's from Belarus. My dad's family is Ashkenazi from Belarus and Lithuania. And my mom's family is Transylvanian Saxon, which are German folks that live in Transylvania, and Romanian. So Romanian on my mom's side. And that was like a big part actually of growing up, and maybe is something that'll filter into our conversation a little bit. But they both come from Queens. I grew up in New Haven. Being Eastern European, even though we were like second generation, my grandparents were refugees from Romania. And being Jewish were definitely really big parts of kind of like how we saw ourselves and how we grew up, and using a lot of Yiddish around the house. Even though I'm not from Queens, having my parents from Queens, I kind of have like, I don't know. There's something about that. It's a big part of who I am.
How did you get to Philly?
I went to Haverford starting in 2015. I went to school there. I started going back and forth to the city. I joined a bike team. And so I started going back and forth to the city a lot, and then realized that I just liked being in Philly a lot. And eventually it got to be, I was going like every day for different activities and internships. And then senior year, I moved full to the city, and I've been there since, and probably stay for at least a little bit more.
How was high school for you?
High school was, so it was lovely. I went to a all-girls Catholic school. I actually was pre-med, and so I was doing science stuff. I was a science kid, and I worked in a lab at Yale. My high school was really big into like genetics research. They had this one nun who got us a really big grant so that we were able to do genetic sequencing, all this crazy stuff. And so I got really into biology. Whenever I have a good teacher, I get really into like whatever they're teaching. So I got super into biology. My dad's a doctor, so I really wanted to be a doctor, but I always was really interested in art as well. So I loved science, and I went to college for biology, and art was like kind of on the side a little bit until the middle of my sophomore year, and then everything changed. I was always really interested in art and had it in my background, like, oh, I just had this as a hobby, because I always kind of saw it as something that was really self-indulgent. I'm not going to be an artist. I'm not going to go into like anything visual. That's just for fancy museums and white cube galleries and things like that. Maybe I'll have it as like a hobby. And I really wanted to help people. I want to be a doctor of some kind. It started by almost failing one of my chemistry classes. I'm like, okay, that's not a great sign. The sophomore year, I had to take like an anthro class for pre-med requirement. And I was already an art minor. So I saw this thing called visual studies. I was like, okay, I'm gonna try that out. What is that? It turned out that visual studies is this combination of something I did not know. This combination of sociology, anthropology, cultural, like adding in all the cultural elements to art history that's so often missing. And it was taught by Dr. Christina Knight, who is this incredible Black woman professor who I feel like she went to Harvard. She just does this amazing, kind of groundbreaking work. At the same time, I've heard this professor, Julie Grigsby, is really good. So she's teaching a class called Race, Sex, and Gender and Sexuality. So I messed up the name of the class. It ended up being this class that I had no idea what I was in for. It was just this kind of tour de force of like intersectional feminism intertwined with the history of the carceral system, reading like Kimberly Crenshaw. And it turns out, of course, like they're both friends and they both go back and forth with their curriculums. And actually, I don't know how involved they are with each other's curricula, but it was incredible because like suddenly I was in a completely different academic world, where I was lucky enough to have these two amazing Black women professors who were teaching and showing me things that I had just never considered. I had just never known about the way that we see the world visually can completely alter our actions and how we think about the world around us. At the end of that semester, this was November of 2016. It was a wild time, but Trump won the election. I was left, but I wasn't too as far left as I am now. A lot of people have kind of described as this sort of wake up call. The world is not not everybody is on my side. Not everybody is on our side. I actually don't know what the world is like at all. And had one of many existential crises of that year, kind of just thinking, okay, there's something very, very wrong here that I am not realizing. And so I went to Julie Grigsby's class the next day, and we kind of all sat around in a circle, and I had to leave the class because I like started crying. I was so embarrassed. And then I came back and she was like, okay, you have to go and watch Malcolm X's speech, The Ballad or the Bullet. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go home and do that. Throughout the next year, I started kind of thinking about, okay, try to get myself involved in a bunch of different arts organizations and say, all right, what is an arts organization that's actually, I've seen it in visual studies, I've seen that this is possible. What can art do to actually change the way that people think about the world? And what can art do to change the people's circumstances? And there's so much, there's so much that's out there. And so the semester after that, I tend to go like way full force into things, almost like way too much. So I went and I interned at the Association for Public Art in Philly. I interned at this kids workshop daycare center where I was their art teacher. And then I started working at a gallery. The summer after that, I started working at Fringe Arts. The year after that is when I started getting involved in mural arts and paper monuments after that as well. So that's where I met Chris Dedrick. But with those two professors, and I was just in a situation where I was very lucky to be able to get involved with so many different mentors. Each one kind of helped me see and alter my worldview in a whole different way to see how art can really just like alter people's lives and the way that we view buildings, the way that we view our city and the monuments that we choose to have. And so that kind of led us up to where we are now.
Were you on social media?
No. So I had my own notebooks and a lot of writing to myself. And I did a class where we talked about graffiti. So I got like a few people together and we had a little reading group where we read about different eras of graffiti. I haven't really been talking on social media until last February.
What made you do it?
I was bored in the house.
Oh no.
I was bored in the house. We were like a year into COVID at that point. I was living by myself. I have all the time in the world to just talk to myself and kind of scream and shout. And so I was on TikTok. I really liked TikTok. Some people say that's easy to get bigger on TikTok, but I kind of wanted to try out different things. I was like, what can I do? Can I make a video go viral? Is it possible? I tried out painting and a few different weird craft things, and it looked super awkward. It didn't like really come together. And then I was like, okay, maybe people will be interested in these skeletons they're called catacomb saints, which are these old, really strange, it's a long story, but they're these skeletons that are completely encrusted and covered in jewels from Germany. And one of those videos took off. And I was like, okay, maybe people won't be horrified by the sight and sound of me talking about art history. We tried a couple of the things that I'm super interested in. Technically, I've really been a public person talking online for about a year at this point.
We are talking because you were bored in the house one day and decided to.
Yeah. And so I was always really interested in art history and talking about art. And I love to write. And I hope one day to be doing much more writing. But there is something that I just love. And I found that I am falling in love with it more every day, and just being able to have my face just talking to people, just saying stuff.
Just getting the message out.
Yeah.
So how did architecture get involved?
Yeah.
Okay, for the audience sake, you did this TikTok about 5-in-1 construction. And so you made an excellent point. And I was like, yes, this is what I was thinking. You made an excellent point about how this 5-in-1 is just like all over the place, and how it's now defining gentrification.
Yeah.
We started talking on IG, and then when you posted it, you really understood what being famous means, is when you say something that no one likes, they go after you. And then
Yeah.
I hopped on Twitter because I saw what they were saying, and then I got some heat too. And it was just like, I was like, oh, these people are crazy.
Oh my gosh. Yes. It's so funny that you bring up that video because I was thinking before coming on, I was like thinking about drama, TikTok drama, and what's been my most controversial videos, because I feel like I can never really tell which ones are gonna take off in a completely different direction than I plan them to. Like there's sometimes that I think that like something's not that controversial and then it'll go people will take it completely different directions than I ever expect.
Right.
But that one I kind of knew. I was like, all right, people are not going to be so happy about this because I made that video. There were a couple points in the video that I wanted to like eventually update, but on the whole, it was really just about, how these structures are a symbol of this much cheaper type of architecture, this much quicker type of architecture, and these like enormous band-aids that are on top, that people are touting as a solution to the housing crisis that, of course, I do not think it's a solution to the housing crisis. I find them really interesting in their specific lack of character and lack of distinction in different neighborhoods. But also I worry about them, about their longevity, and what does it mean that all the new housing that is available for people are these very similar buildings. There's a way more concerns that I put in the video, but I put it up on Twitter, which I shouldn't have done. I woke up in the morning, it had like 190,000 views, and every single YIMBY, which for those that are listening stands for Yes in My Backyard, YIMBY in the world was like all over me, all over the page. It was like, you have no idea what you're talking about. You should take this down. You're harming all housing activism, it was constant. It was berating. It was like again and again. It was over and over. And I eventually got to meet a couple of different people that have been in this conversation, especially on Twitter, and learned just a lot about how this has been a problem on Twitter for the past, at least the past 7 years, where in housing, there is a very certain opinion which dominates the conversation a lot of the time, which is that more buildings, yes, good. And that when people tend to speak back about that for whatever reason, some of them are good reasons, some of them are bad reasons, they'll get labeled as a NIMBY, as a no in my backyard person. My stance on that has always been I'm not the person that's saying no new buildings, but I think we should be so careful about what do we want to see in the architecture. If we have a huge new wave of new buildings, don't we want to make sure that they're not continuing legacies of structural inequality that have been with us for such a long time? But that was just one video that I knew that would get a little bit of pushback. I don't think I expected just how much pushback, but I've become so much more interested in housing after I healed, after I licked my wounds,
after you went to therapy and with all the emotional.
Oh my God, yeah. Because it's one thing where it's out of all of the comments, all the backlash that you get from having a large presence online, sometimes they're stupid comments. Your eyebrows are dumb, or you have no idea what you're talking about. You are irrelevant, or stuff like that. It's okay. But then there's people that are no, they'll say, okay, you're actually doing harm with this thing. Oh my God. And did I just spread some kind of piece of misinformation that could be harmful? I think that was the issue with that video for me too. And then this hasn't been as much of a problem with as many other ones, but this one in particular, I was oh my God, what if I actually am doing harm? What if I don't know what I'm talking about? And so that ended up leading down a whole other path of learning. Since then, I've been reading a ton about housing and finding out more about the YIMBY movement, about, the backgrounds of NIMBY movements and things like that. So that's been really interesting to kind of take a backseat. Yeah.
Do you have any regrets, or would you have edited or done anything differently looking back?
Looking back, I probably would have stress some of the nuances of the housing crisis and how there are some new buildings that need to be built. There was an article written by Jerusalem Demsas, who is an amazing researcher, that I had called in the video. I had said that the article was gaslighting, which looking back, that was just not the right word to use. There are just a few things that I had said in the video that maybe I could have phrased that differently. The more that I've learned about the housing crisis as well, I think there were a couple different things that I could have stressed more in a different way. And also, like, from listening to your conversation with Nikita Reed and listening to her podcast as well, the more I learn about preservation and about housing repairs and the reasons why people get evicted, and more when that happens in Philadelphia. So following eviction news in Philadelphia, those are the things that I do want to stress a lot more in conversations going forward, where we have this huge concentration on building new buildings and not preserving the buildings that we have. And so one thing that a lot of people will say, especially like folks that are like super pro new building, we can point to the numbers that show that we do have technically more houses than people, but a lot of those houses aren't livable. So if we concentrate on preservation, if we concentrate on keeping those houses that we have livable, that's a huge part of it.
The fact that all these buildings look the same and it doesn't identify the culturalness of the neighborhood. It's literally just metal cladding and maybe brick mixed in somewhere, and that's it. Like, there's no research into the neighborhood itself. There was another TikTok talking about gentrification, blue or gray, one of the colors, and how there was this neighborhood and it lost all its color because people were buying up all these houses and painting it this neutral color because that's the new thing to do. Secondly, the idea that when you flood the supply, then the demand would dwindle. But no one is talking about people want to make money. The whole point of building these buildings is so that they could make money. So if you have overpriced units, even if you can get, $5,000 for a 2-bedroom a month, and let's say you have 20 units and they're all $5,000, all you got to do is rent 10 of them and you're okay. Like, who cares if the others sit? You're still making your money. You understand what I mean? Like, and if I keep it at 5,000, then that's more money for me. So the idea that you flooding, take DC, for example, DC, all you see along the skylines are these multi-family housing. Like, they're everywhere now. They fill the skylines up. And there's still homeless people on the streets. You're telling me that we need to knock down single family homes so that it could be like a monopoly of high rises everywhere with little green spaces here and there, or a school or a playground, and no single family housing that will solve the homeless problem?
Right.
There's so many other problems with that.
You're
going to have empty apartment buildings that'll be riddled with crime at one point. What if you get flight? The pandemic is a perfect example. New York housing prices went down so significantly. People were like, yes, I can actually afford to live here. And now that everything's back to normal, your $1,200 studio apartment is now $4,000 again. And so those are the two things I got out of that I was fighting for, that people just didn't seem to understand. So I didn't know you were art history. I was assuming that you went to architecture school. You talk about the Bajas, you talked about Le Corbusier. Like, how did you get there? Like, how?
So starting from like where I was in visual studies, so I was with Christina Knight. We were doing all that, and even though I don't think I had the language to talk about it at the time or really articulate it too well, but I started thinking about ornament. It's funny because it's like, right now I'm really deep into architecture. My content for the past few months has been very, very, very architecture centered. And I do keep coming back to it because, I don't know, there's just like this pull, there's this draw that I find super magnetic about buildings and talking about them. Like a year ago, if you had been on my page, it was all about textiles. It was all about embroidery, and then a little bit about folk art. And once in a while, I've talked about Eastern European Easter eggs. And so what it ends up all being about is ornament. My godfather, actually, wait, he's actually not my godfather, but sometimes I think about him as my godfather. His name is Guy Ferraro. But about a year, when I was like 12, like 11 or 12, he gave me this book of styles of ornament by someone named Speltz. It's from like 1947 or something like that. It's one of those old ornament books. So it's filled with all of these super beautiful, detailed drawings of wrought iron and etched stone and carvings from all over the world. And I was just flipping through it, and I got really into little details. All the way back in college, jump ahead to college, I was starting to think about how do we talk about graffiti. I thought that the most interesting way to talk about it, or just like what I was this interest in ornament that I had always had on these ornament doodles that I've put down for a little bit, but hopefully will come back up again. But I started just getting very, very interested in why we used to have all of these really brightly colored, super embroidered clothing. And now our clothing is much simpler. And the same thing in design. Like, why does good design look so often so white or so minimalist? Like, why do we think about good design in that way? And so then I started just digging around and really just kind of out of nowhere. So I was looking, okay, ornament history. And the guy that always comes up when you're searching like the history of ornament is Adolf Loos. When I read Ornament and Crime, which basically just starts off with him talking about people from Papua New Guinea, indigenous people in Papua New Guinea, and he calls people childlike, he calls people them primitive, he calls all of these really, really just terrible things to say. That's all based in this evolutionary racial science, that they are decorating themselves because they're not as evolved as the modern white European man. And I was like, okay, this is just a crazy racist guy from the 20s, right? It's like, whatever. And then I started looking, like kind of digging a little bit deeper, and was blown away to learn how influential this piece of writing was, and that he was drawing on so many different ideas at the time, and how many people that influenced, and people that would end up writing similar things. And so it was when I got to Colocate and in New Orleans, where I worked for them for Paper Monuments, and I did some graphic design for them afterwards, and started hanging out with Brian Lee and Susan Mobley, where I was just like, again, like this is another like one of those like world shaking, like worldview moments where I started learning just how much racism is integrated into our understanding of architecture, what good design, I'm putting in air quotes, good design looks like. I think we ended up striking up like a little bit of a conversation about Adolf Loos one day, where I was like, I mentioned him. He was like, oh wait, do you know about Adolf Loos and like this whole thing? And I was like, yeah, this is like, I'm obsessed with this. And so I found that it was super interesting to talk about it in clothing as well. It's not that everyone knows about how bad fast fashion is, but it has become a very big conversation that I'm really happy is as big as it is. What I've found out is that whenever I post something about an architect who, like Philip Johnson, who was a white supremacist Nazi, who was so incredibly influential, but like Le Corbusier being a fascist, things like that, people will be like, I went to design school and they never taught me this. I went to design school for this many years and I had no idea. What I find so frustrating is that there are these huge parts about the structure of architecture and architecture curricula that have been completely swept under the rug or just modified. And that absolutely fascinates me and it frustrates me, and I can't shut up about it. I kind of dabbled a little bit in cities and architecture a little bit back when I was at UPenn, where we volunteered at Monument Lab for mural arts. And that was kind of one of those great projects where everyone was questioning, our monuments and what it looks like to have a monument that really represents our cities. It was a time, it was 2017, a lot of Confederate monuments were coming down. Started thinking about the city in general and this idea of public space and what it would look like if our public space was determined by us, by the people that lived there. And so a professor was, I'm naming a lot of names because there's so many people that I feel are like, have just completely changed just the way that I think. So my professor, Laura McGrane, she gave me this book. She was like, you should read The Production of Space by Henri Lefebvre. And it took me months and months because I'm a very, very slow reader. I actually have reading disabilities and a bunch of just learning disabilities in general. So it took me such a long time to read. But by the end of it, I came out like an anarchist. And I've been an anarchist ever since. I was like, thanks, professor. And that was just one of those things where I just found architecture to be like, sometimes it's easy to look at it and once you start looking at all of these structures, to get very down, can be very pessimistic sometimes, like very upsetting, especially when you see all these new structures going up that continue all of these legacies and continue dividing people and continue a lot of make inequities worse and worse. But also when I learned about traditional architecture of Indigenous peoples that works with ventilation in a way that is completely different from how our buildings are right now, where it's like very hopeful. It brings you so much like, okay, our world could look totally different. We don't have to waste all these fossil fuels on keeping ourselves cool. We could actually do this a different way if we broke down to certain zoning laws, if we didn't have something as arbitrary as money and budgets, if we actually invested in land back, if Indigenous people had the right to say what happens with the land on Turtle Island, we could have a completely different world, a completely different way of looking at architecture. And then goes back into being like frustrated and angry because, you see like the amount of Black and Indigenous architects that end up getting licensed. And you look at these histories of what architecture, even though I've never worked in an architecture office, but I end up like getting obsessed and reading all these articles about what the environment is like there. It starts to kind of all fit together.
That's amazing. This is like, you have an insight that no one else in the industry, I shouldn't say no one else, that's not true, but you're an outsider looking in.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said before, I didn't even know you were art history major or an artist, like a pure artist. Mm-hmm. I thought that you went to architecture school. I was already prepared. When you think about the architecture education, all this stuff, I was prepared to ask you. And you're just reading this. You're just following like a rabbit hole, a path, and you're just picking this up and you're just reading and you're just being observant and you're listening. Like, it's, if anything, this is a definition of what allies should do. And I don't say that word a lot. Like, I barely say that. But like, I mean, if you took heat over like 5/1 and you're still here, I mean,
oh man, oh shucks. It's one of the things that actually fascinates me so much is how angry people will get when we talk about architecture or like challenge their ideas about what the history of modern architecture is. And I find that like just mind-blowingly fascinating, that
because you're indoctrinated and the architectural education is there to beat you down. It's kind of like the Army or Navy or whatever, like it's like you shave your head so you can be amongst, like, everybody looks the same. That's the goal. And so whoever can graduate, like, you survive. It's like you start off with 100 people and 25 graduate. That is the goal. So the people those 25 who graduate, they've been indoctrinated. They follow the foundations of modern architecture. It's, the Bajas, it's the minimalism, it's the straight angles or curves or, whatever is fancy, and you were able to see through that BS in a year really quickly.
Yeah.
Really
And it's,
quickly.
I mean, I think it's easier, I think, when you haven't been in that for that long, and you can kind of come in from the outside and see all of these things from afar. As a person, like, I've always been a little bit of like an observer. I see myself as just like someone that I like to be backstage, not in the middle of stuff, like not being the person. Like, it's funny because like I am a graphic designer right now, but I do get so much more enjoyment maybe out of looking at graphic design as a whole, or looking at these larger structures and stepping back. I still love to make art, but sometimes I like talking about art more than I like making art. Like, I'm not entirely sure.
And it's fine. Like, to be fluid it's the best thing, because that's how you produce. When you're in the mood to write, you become a really great writer. When you're in the mood to be an artist, you're a really good artist. And that's the beauty of it. Like, that's just, just flow with your whatever word I can't think of right now. Another thing too that I've noticed is where you first started off with textiles and integrating that with your own heritage, knowing who you are and your culture. And at the same time, you're able to address the wrongs in the world.
Yeah. So that was like one of the ways that that's interesting. So when I started at TikTok, I was talking a lot more and was getting a lot more, into like the textile world, into like cultural dress around Europe and around Eastern Europe. And one of the goals of that was to show how colorful and diverse Europe is, which does actually do a lot. One of the first things that I found like really touched a lot of people on TikTok was how Hitler and the Nazis really suppressed a lot of ethnic German clothing, which used to be like extremely diverse. It actually still is diverse in people that still practice it all around Germany. Extremely bright, lots of colors, especially in the Catholic region. It was like incredibly rich and diverse. And so there was an entire propaganda campaign to make pan-German identity of just like this very simple dirndl, like this very, very simple dress. And that piece of propaganda has stuck with us to the point that people who are German, who live in Germany, were commenting on that video saying, I never knew this. I never learned growing up like this. And of course, many more, I think, German Americans were like, okay, I always was really ashamed about this part of my culture. Like, I was really I just thought it was just beer and pretzels and like maybe Oktoberfest. Even a part of me as well, my family, part of my family that's from Transylvania is that German part. So I was always like, oh no, but like, we're Romanian, we're not like actually German. But the more I learned about that culture and about the incredible richness of Transylvanian Saxon culture, where there's a lot going on. There's the outfits are incredibly floral and there's amazing headdresses. There's just lots and lots of stuff. What I was going back to a little bit earlier this year with learning about Orientalism and how Western Europeans in academia would really frame Europe in a lot of ways as this kind of bland place, especially Western Europe as this bland place. And then we have, the Soviet bloc coming in, where we see Eastern Europe as this very gray place, this very colorless, drab, sad place, or even like the shtetls. So looking back to and trying to find Jewish textile history, which is a little bit difficult to research and can be traumatizing to research, looking at the shtetl as something that's not like this sad place all the time, but somewhere that we had joy and we had culture and we had vibrancy. And so one pitfall, a huge pitfall that I think I started kind of falling into and have seen many other people unfortunately get way too far into, is concentrating a little bit too much on celebrating and uplifting this culture, and almost, having this whole cultural revivalist movement, which can be good because the culture itself can be really beautiful and really amazing and valuable, but it can be used for the most awful purposes. So you see this very, very, very large Norse pagan revival movement all around the US. And some of those folks are getting really in touch with the far right and are getting, and there is that entire way that Nazis, especially in actually Transylvania, in Saxon Transylvania, would use the culture as a part of their propaganda. And they would use that like, oh, we're indigenous to this land, we have this rich culture. So it's really interesting because it's like I was getting very, very into that idea of cultural diversity and, knowing who we are. But also, I think there is sometimes like we always have to make sure that that is balanced with keeping our eye on the prize, especially when we're, here in Philadelphia, keeping the eye on the prize with Black liberation and land back, and with, ending police brutality, with defunding the police, with all of these things. Again, it's so easy to get, I think, for some folks to get very caught up in like, okay, I'm going to revive my culture and I'm going to end my whiteness. And it's like, no, you're still going to be white. But when that all ties back to what architecture looks like and what our clothing looks like and what it means to be producing these things really quickly that we used to produce really slowly and with a lot of care, that it starts to get really exciting to kind of piece those things together.
Mm-hmm. How do you do your research?
Oh man, I'll get really excited about a topic. So usually like I will find something and then get very obsessed with it. So it'll be like obelisks. So one day I'll have like a whole other thing about obelisks. First go into Wikipedia and I'll just try to get a background, very, very basic background. Then I'll try and find some like news articles and try to find something that's a little bit more reputable, maybe like 3 or 4 articles. This is like the different steps of the rabbit hole, going down and down, down. And so I'll read a few of those. And then if I feel like this topic is just big, and I get really, really into it, I'll get a couple books and I'll read that book. I'll get really excited and then often I'll find like connections in that book. Okay, this person's talking about that author a lot, so I'm going to go and read that author. And so right now, the book I'm super happy that exists is Race in Modern Architecture with Irene Chang and Maple O. Wilson and Charles L. Davis II, who have amassed this incredible collection of essays from different thinkers and writers talk about how race has come into modern architecture. So that has been like a very big part. I think I get the most from texts, from books that are off of the internet. I think we get almost like a little bit too excited about the internet sometimes. I get too excited about the internet sometimes and all the information that's available there. But so my mom started as an investigative journalist. She's now a chef. This is something that we talk about sometimes, that there is so much information that's really not on the internet that you really, really can't find. That is just it's in books. And so, that step before books, I'll something go into Google Scholar and JSTOR, and Command F is my favorite thing. So I'll be like looking like, okay, what did you say about racism? What did you say about ornament? What did you say about all of this? And I'll find like little snippets, but I do feel like I end up learning the most when I'm just sitting down with a really good dense book. And that's when things get really exciting.
How long does it take you to create a TikTok?
It depends. It depends on the topic. So like sometimes it'll be just a really quick like one-off. So right now I have one I'm prepping about stairs. I'm calling you right now from Montreal. So stairs, there's a lot of stairs in Montreal where all these houses have these beautiful like ornamental staircases. And so for that one's like a little bit, I don't think I want to go too far into it. It'll probably end up taking me about 2 hours to put the whole thing together for like just a 60-second video, like an hour and a half to 2 hours. If it's like a 3-minute video where the other day about the CIA and how the CIA promoted modern art, modern American art around the world, which is a crazy, crazy topic, that'll take longer because I want to kind of parse out the information, create a timeline. I'll write a script for myself. I'll go back and like try to shorten it. I try to like shorten as much as I can, record the video, edit the video, do the whole thing, that'll probably take more like writing it and the video together. That'll probably all take like a day altogether. But what I'm trying to do is to like move into YouTube. I think that's going to be really exciting when I finally get like the first YouTube essay up, because like right now on TikTok, you know, like the videos that end up doing well are shorter, and sometimes they're shocking and they're exciting, and they're thought provoking. But what I really find more fun almost is to have just like just to push as much information as I can in people's faces. So if I can make something that the more I can put in there and the more background and information, I don't really like to say nuance. People will be like, oh yay, it's so nuanced, and they'll clap. But I'm like, no, I don't really like that word, because I feel that tries to numb things or ameliorate like ideas that should be scary to people. But I think the more information that I can put in there, the better. So I'm looking forward to kind of starting up a YouTube thing and having like 40-minute long videos where we can really dive into something and pick it apart. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I can't wait. I can't wait for that.
Yeah, me too.
You can really make money off of that, because you can't make money off of TikTok right now.
No, you can't. I mean, you could make a couple cents off a video, but honestly, on YouTube, you could actually get compensated for the stuff that you do. On TikTok, unless you're like a super, 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 super big creator. And even if you are, it'll never amount to the work that people put in. It'll never amount to what you do. So yeah.
So because of TikTok, you got a job, right?
Yes.
What? How did that happen? Like, I saw you post and I was like, oh my God, it's happening too fast. It's happening so fast.
It's happening too fast to me. I am excited. So yeah, Hyperallergic on Instagram. Oh my gosh, I hope I said his name right. Realizing I haven't said his name right. I haven't said his name out loud in the public space before. So he reached out to me on Instagram saying like, oh, would you like to do a few videos for Hyperallergic, and we could write for us a little bit. And we talked a little bit, and it was in the making for a while, and now we're there. And now I'm making a few videos for them a week. I'm writing stuff for them and posting a few articles for them, a few videos for them a week. And it's really exciting. I've been reading Hyperallergic for a long time. It's also been that kind of critical outside view that I really love, that like independent view that really go in and criticize absolutely every single thing about the art world and the museum world. I am so excited to be working with them. It's been like, again, a year since I've been out here publicly. My face has been out here, and I'm just still astounded that people are interested in stuff that I'm interested in. so that's that makes me so happy. Even though all these topics are like, people are like, how do you not scream when you're talking about these things that are so depressing sometimes? I actually find it all very hopeful. Again, what we were talking about for a second, we can change the way that we see things and the way that we make things if we change certain structures like capitalism. Finding out that people are so interested in these ideas has been just a wild, amazing ride, and I'm excited to see what happens next.
Me too. I know we're stuck on time and you got to go, but thank you so much for talking to me. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm super, super, super honored, and yeah, it's all very exciting. I'm a little bit giddy, as you can see. So thank you. I hope we can chat again soon. And yes.
We can always just connect, and I'm always around. I'm always on Instagram. So hit me up anytime.
I will. We're not strangers.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. Have fun.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay. Bye. Listeners, I have an exciting announcement. I decided to launch a membership program for the show, where you have a chance to support me and the show directly. I love creating the show, and it means the world to me that you all tune in to keep hearing me week after week. But it takes an immense amount of time and energy to produce. I want to keep the show going, and I want to invest in its growth. And I also want you to become a partner with me in this journey. That's why I'm excited to give you a chance to officially become a supporter of the show at glow.fm/archispolly, ARCHIS POLLY, or by clicking the link in the show notes. It's quick and easy. It takes less than 30 seconds and just takes clicking a link in the show notes and using Apple or Google Pay. You don't have to create any new logins, and you can contribute as much or as little as you like. If this show is part of your day or week and you like what I'm doing, then visit glow.fm/archespolly, all one word, and support me and the show in any way you can today.